Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Lockwood-Shabat, and I am the Interim Co-President and Vice President of Programs at Washington Area Women's Foundation. The Women's Foundation is a public charity that's dedicated to improving the lives of women and girls throughout the Washington metropolitan region. And I'm really delighted today to welcome you all to today's webinar. We're excited to report that we have more than 190 people who have registered for the webinar, and they come from all across the country. I wanted to start out by quickly giving you an overview of what we have in store for today. I will kick things off with a very quick summary of the Women's Economic Security Campaign, and then we will be hearing from the U.S. Department of Labor's Women's Bureau about initiatives that they are undertaking. We're also going to hear a summary of our new policy report, and we'll learn a little bit more about some successful efforts that are happening on the ground. And finally, we will have some time for some question and answers. Before we get started, I wanted to provide a little bit of instructions around the webinar and the technology. Because of the size of the audience, the webinar is in listen-only mode. So that means that all of the audience members are muted. We do strongly encourage everyone to ask questions, and you can do this by using the Ask a Question function that you'll see on your computer screen, and we'll be collecting these questions throughout the webinar to queue them up for the question and answer period. If you prefer to ask your question via audio rather than typing it, we encourage you, when we get to the question and answer section, you can use the Raise Your Hand function. And then you will be called upon in order to ask your question verbally. Also, I want to let everyone know if we don't have an opportunity to get to your question, we will be sure to provide all questions to the panelists along with contact information so that they can respond to you directly in writing. One last note about the technology. Should there be any kind of an interruption in the internet connection, your screen may go blank for just a moment. You'll still continue to hear the audio, and we will very quickly bring up the video portion so that that comes back. Finally, before we begin, I wanted to send a very special thanks to our national funders for supporting our efforts in this work. So a thank you to the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, the Ford Foundation, Sara Lee Foundation, Libra Foundation, and the Allstate Foundation. Next slide. So I'm going to go ahead and start us off by giving you some background around the Women's Economic Security Campaign, or what we refer to as WESC. WESC is really working to use the power and resources of women's funds across the country to increase opportunity for low-income women and their families. We are striving to elevate the voices of women's foundations to ensure that the problems faced by women and their families who are living in poverty are truly at the center of efforts to fix our nation's economy and create opportunity for all. In terms of who's involved in WESC, it truly is a partnership of 4 women's funds you'll see on the screen: the Women's Foundation for Greater Memphis, Chicago Foundation for Women, Washington Area Women's Foundation, and the Women's Foundation of California. We also are working in partnership with our national affinity group, the Women's Funding Network. And for those of you who are not familiar with women's funds, or this is the first time that you're hearing a little bit more about the work of women's funds, I encourage you to visit the Women's Funding Network website to learn more, and that is www.womensfundingnetwork.org. Each of the WESC partners are working in our local regions on addressing the needs of low-income women. We've launched this particular campaign in an effort to really harness our collective power and raise the issues faced by low-income women and the strategies that are best suited to help them on the national stage. Next slide. We are engaging in this work by using 3 specific strategies or activities. The first is we're working to link women's funds to national policy debate, so providing them with the resources and information so that they have a better understanding of what's happening at the federal level in terms of policy that's impacting women and their families. The second is by linking women's funds to advocacy strategies. And this is done through some peer-to-peer mentoring and, again, providing additional resources so that women's funds have specific strategies that they can then employ at the local level. And the third piece, which I think is really critical, is linking the grantee experience and the women that the grantees serve to the national policy conversation. I think the unique thing about women's funds is that they work so directly with the community-based organizations on the ground who are serving women and their families every day. And so they have the ability to really raise up the stories of women and incorporate that into the national policy debate. Next slide. What does this campaign look like to date? Currently, there are just over 40 organizational members of WESC. There are 31 women's funds from across the country who have joined us in this effort and working to improve the economic security of low-income women. And all of these members have taken the information that they've learned to date back to their local communities and are really doing a number of things in order to move the goals of WESC forward. The first is by making best practice grants. A number of women's funds across the country are really engaging in strategic grant making. The second is by meeting with policymakers and raising the questions that need to be asked in terms of what can be done to improve the economic security of low-income women. And the third is by providing information to organizations in their own networks about jobs, training, and education for low-income women. Next slide. Economic security can really mean a lot of things to a lot of people. It's really very much an umbrella term. And as we undertook this effort, we realized that we had to very narrowly focus our resources. And so in terms of the initial policy focus that we're looking at, we're really looking at this through a jobs-focused lens. So the three policy areas that we have decided to focus on in the beginning, the first is around green jobs. And in October of last year, we launched our Green Jobs brief and held a webinar to release that particular brief. The second issue, which is what we're talking about today, is in terms of education and training. And we know that the administration is very focused on job creation, as they should be, and our local policymakers are very focused on jobs. But we really need to be focused on the gender-specific aspects of education, training, and job creation. And we're going to hear more about that later when we talk about the brief. The third issue that we will be focusing on later this summer and into the fall is the issue of child care, which is absolutely critical to the work efforts of low-income single mothers. Second, I want to say a word about the resources that the campaign is providing to policymakers, women's funds, and advocates across the country. The first is through our policy briefs. So as I mentioned, we've released our Green Jobs brief in October of last year. Today we'll be talking more about the education and training brief, and then later in the summer or fall we'll be releasing a brief on child care. The second is our website, which is www.womenseconomicsecurity.org. And the website contains a wealth of information on our partners, topics, the issue areas, and ways in which to get involved. One of the things you'll find on the website is our toolkit, which is really constructed for both women's funds and other advocates across the country, and contains suggestions of ways to raise the voices of each of those organizations on behalf of low-income women with children. In the toolkit, you will find things like talking points, op-eds, newsletter blurbs, and sample letters to the editor. And all of those tools can be taken and used in a way that's best suited for your local area so they can be adapted to your needs. Lastly, grant making, as I mentioned earlier, each of the 4 women's funds that are partners in WESC have been engaged in strategic grant making designed to support the ultimate goal of the WESC campaign. And lastly, let me just close by saying that the Women's Economic Security Campaign has pulled together a lot of information and really worked hard to listen to the experiences of local program providers and the families that they serve. And we're trying to make a connection between this information and the national and state policy. So we hope that you find this information helpful.